One of the most watched political races in Arizona will be the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office. We talked to one of Sheriff Joe Arpaio's challengers, Paul Penzone, this week. Welcome to the Mike Broomhead Show.
Well, I got a message, I got a song. Can I get a witness? Tell me what's going on. I show the people I've been away.
Welcome, thanks for being here. We talked with Paul Penzone, who is challenging Sheriff Arpaio again for the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office. It's a great interview. We'll do that in a few minutes. Of course, coming up later on is Broomhead's Best and hashtag this, but every show begins with something we call the sweep. Let's start with an election update. Now, the Republican side of things, Donald Trump has already secured the nomination. He is running unopposed right now. He has now crushed every record for Republicans in a primary. But the interesting thing is Super Tuesday, which I think is going to be the last Super Tuesday for the Democrats. Hillary Clinton makes really a big jump forward. She wins California by 13 points. There was a question of whether or not she would beat Bernie Sanders there. She wins New Jersey, New Mexico, so it is all but locked up. But Hillary Clinton making a statement and sounding, very presidential and very calm. Watch this.
Thanks to you, we've reached a milestone. The first time in our nation's history that a woman will be a major party's nominee.
Now, there is a difference here. Hillary Clinton, very calculated there, very calm, big smile on her face. Now, you know everyone has their issues to work on when speaking in public, and if they're smart, they listen to advisors. Donald Trump had better start listening to his advisors. Hillary Clinton not sounding shrill, not screaming to the crowd, not in that high-pitched voice that really bothers people. I know it's aesthetics, I know we're talking about that, but it's very important. That was history. It is history that she is the first female nominee of a major party. Now, I'm sad that it was that woman. I'm not a fan of Hillary Clinton, but she is listening to her advisors. Will Donald Trump follow suit? Bernie Sanders had a meeting this week with President Obama and with Harry Reid, and you have to believe that what happened was that they sat him down and said, it's time. What do you need? What do you want? To back away and endorse Hillary Clinton and let her focus on Donald Trump. But it's getting down to that. She's got it about locked up. I think that's what we're going to see next. But what I found most interesting about the election this week is the economist Ben Stein. Ben Stein has a piece, or has been quoted as talking about all of the candidates. He said of Donald Trump, he doesn't know a blank damn thing about economics, or about economics at all. He said Hillary Clinton knows a little bit. She's a smart woman. But it's what he said about Bernie Sanders that was really most telling. And he said that Bernie Sanders is willfully ignorant. He could be educated. He refuses to be educated on the economy. But he lamented that none of them are free trade people, and couldn't believe that Donald Trump got the Republican nomination and isn't a free trade advocate. And he thinks that free trade is what's going to bolster this economy and get us back on track. And as of right now, none of the candidates are talking about being in favor of free trade. Locally, 3 officials have been fired from the Phoenix Veterans Administration. It's taken a while. Dr. Darren Deering is gone. He's the chief of staff, or was the chief of staff. Deering is the guy that I talked about in the interview. Remember Sharon Hellman, when they finally did an interview about the fake list where they denied knowing about them? What they didn't say that the list didn't exist. They said it didn't come out of our office. Dr. Deering was the stereotypical physician wearing the lab coat with the stethoscope around his neck just so everybody knew he was a doctor. Well, he may still be a doctor, but not at the VA. He's out. Lance Robinson is gone, associate director. Brad Curry, chief of health administration. Now, they all can appeal their firing if they want to, but they're going to do it without being on paid administrative leave anymore. So they're fired. So Deb Amdur is the woman's name. Miss Amdur is the head of the Phoenix VA. She's making changes, and from everything I've heard, is doing a very good job. So bringing some good news about changes at the Phoenix VA. I love that. In the Valley, the Phoenix police chief race is down to 3 candidates. Out of Washington, D.C., the assistant chief Peter Newsham. In Phoenix, the assistant chief right now, Mike Kurtenbach, and Oxnard Police Chief Jerry Williams. Chief Williams was one of the assistant chiefs when she was here at Phoenix and got the chief's job in Oxnard, California. It's going to be, in my opinion, it's going to be either Mr. Kurtenbach or Mrs. Williams are going to be your next chief of police in Phoenix. Big job for the next Phoenix police chief because they are now going to manage growth. What's happened under the current chief, Chief Yonner, first of all, had to clean up a mess that was left with the chief that was behind him. Chief Garcia was abysmal, and morale was down, and the relationship with the city and citizens was down. It was horrible. And he had to manage an understaffed police department. The next chief of police will have to manage growth. Hundreds of young officers coming on, replacing retiring officers. It's going to be a younger agency with less experience. Going to have to manage that growth. It's a big job, and one of those two, I believe, will be the next one to do it. Also in the state of Arizona, Prop 123 crossing another hurdle when the Attorney General said he is not going to try to stop anything. There was a fight about Prop 123, saying there are some that believe that there's a legal hurdle that has to be overcome and that Congress had to do something to change the money out of the state land trust. Well, that's not, in my opinion, that's not the case. And the Attorney General said, if that group wants to get it in front of a judge and a judge wants to put in some kind of a stop, that's fine. But the Attorney General's office can't do that without a judge telling them to. So the money will start flowing from Prop 123. Now here's the question. Is it going to be dollars in the classroom? That's what's most important. Are the teachers going to be paid more? Are principals going to have more control of that money so when they have a good teacher that's getting good results with students, they can pay that teacher to keep that teacher and get rid of some of the bad teachers? Are we on a path to where we need to be in education? Coming up in a few moments, Paul Penzone, who is running for sheriff in Maricopa County. He's done this before. He's a good man. It was a great interview. You're going to love this two-segment interview with Paul Penzone as we sit down and talk about this office, what qualifies him for it, and what the sheriff in Maricopa County needs to do next. That's coming up here in just a few moments. And of course, later on in the show, hashtag this Broomhead's Best. And if you're not following us on all of our social media platforms, you should be, because that's the way you can keep in touch with us. We'll be back with an interview with Paul Penzone. Stick around. All right, political season is here, and of course, with elections, one of the most watched races in Arizona is the Maricopa County Sheriff's race. Joe Arpaio, one of the best-known names in American politics, and running against him is Paul Penzone. Thanks for coming and joining us.
Honored to be here, Mike. Thank you for having me.
So, talk to me about this. This is not your first time doing this, and you have a relationship with Sheriff Joe.
Absolutely.
So, how does that work?
You know, there is that level of a little bit of a challenge because when you want to pursue something that matters on behalf of the community, you will have opposition. And sometimes that opposition may be somebody that you've had a relationship with professionally and otherwise. And in the room privately, we've always had good conversations and treat each other with respect. And I would state with confidence that I would never want to disrespect someone who has served this community, regardless of whether I agree or disagree with some of their decisions. But when you're pursuing something that is in the best interest of the community at large, you have to ask yourself, do you really feel like what is being done now, currently, best serves the needs of this community? So I try to be respectful to him at all times and kind, but I have expressed that I just feel like it's a time for us to move forward with some new leadership, and leadership that is innovative, that is progressive, that focuses solely on safety and security, enforcing the laws, and to try to eliminate that political element that's been infused too much recently.
Is it a bigger challenge running against the name Joe Arpaio, or is it a bigger challenge that because this is a partisan race and you're running as a Democrat, is that a bigger challenge in a state that's got a big Republican population?
No, I think that's an exceptional question, and I don't know that I've really been asked on those terms before. I think they both have their balance. The sheriff's notoriety is considerable. It's considerable across the nation. In 24 years in service, he has defined himself. And at the same time, because this office has a political element, although it shouldn't, there are voters who look at it, and they've come to me and said two things. Paul, you're the first Democrat I've ever voted for. And I always respond by saying, you don't have to worry about it because I'm a lawman. I'm not a politician. So thank you. Or they say, gosh, I'd like to vote for you, but I'm not sure because I'm a conservative Republican that I could vote for a Democrat. And again, I respond the same way and say, listen, just ask yourself, I am not an unknown commodity. I don't try to compare myself to the sheriff's notoriety, but this is my community. I've served in this community in front, and I've been blessed. My law enforcement career had great opportunity, and post-law enforcement, I've had the chance to stay engaged in public safety. So my career is there for everyone to review, and I would just ask them to say, has this guy really, when he put the uniform on and served us, gone out in front and fought crime first and foremost?
So let's talk about your career then. First in law enforcement. How many years and where did you serve in law enforcement?
I was with Phoenix PD for 21 years. I started in patrol like everyone does, and I spent some time in training. Then I worked undercover narcotics for 6 years. So I saw crime from the inside out. Spent 3 years on a federal task force with DEA. So we did high-level conspiracy cases across the nation. And the greatest part of that experience was working with all the different agencies from the state, from local, from federal, from every element of law enforcement as well as the prosecutorial side. So that relationship as well as that experience was tremendous. And then I finished my career in silent witness. Before going there, I was in administration though, where I oversaw budgets, which is extremely important. But silent witness, I worked with every agency on the baseline killer, the serial shooter, child molesters, you name it, and I went with the same conviction. If this is my family member and someone has harmed them, who do I want out in front fighting to catch that person and hold them accountable? And those are the people I was surrounded with. Good men and women in uniform who every day went to work saying, we're going to get bad people off the street and keep our community safe.
When you talk about that relationship between federal and local law enforcement, one of the things that's happened is there's been a big breakdown in that. And to be honest with you, I hold the Obama administration accountable for a lot of what's happening because it used to be, and I know this for a fact, that maybe when you were in Phoenix PD, that if a Phoenix police officer needed a border patrol for an interpreter or they needed to maybe to intercede with someone that may be here illegally, they had radio contact with the Border Patrol in a patrol car in Phoenix. That's kind of broken down to the point now where maybe on the street there's a good relationship, but it seems as if the agencies aren't working together the same. How does that get repaired?
So the human relationship we just spoke of, more often than not, is always strong. When you're face to face with someone and you have a common interest, they're willing to work together. Organizationally, they're in silos. I can remember times when my troops might be on the street and they would come across a home where there was it was filled with people who were just brought in the country and dropped off. They call them drop houses.
Right.
And my officers might wait an hour to 2 hours for someone to respond because of the lack of resources or support. We have to, it's almost like the business world, we have to act locally and think globally. We have to be so convicted on a local level on how we're going to address this that we force the hand of other organizations or agencies to come in partnership with us to get it done, because we will not allow for it to fall short when it comes to safety. So when we talk about the immigration issue, here's where the sheriff and I differ. It's not on a matter of keeping the border safe. But my background was dismantling organizations, drug trafficking organizations. There are human trafficking organizations and sex trafficking organizations who operate in the same capacity. That's where I want the focal point to be. I want trained professionals to target the hierarchy and dismantle them there so that we can reduce the number of those coming into the country illegally and being victimized at the same time. And then we have to force the government to be more progressive in their manner of addressing our immigration challenges.
So when you look at the office that you're running for now, do you see wholesale changes that need to happen in areas? Are there going to be things that you are going to keep in place that you think that have been done well?
Absolutely. The posse, for starts. The sheriff has done a very good job of bringing more focus on the posse as a unit. But the posse is something, it's not new. It's been around forever. But what we need to do is make them more versed in a lot of the needs that would support other agencies. I'll give you an example. I'd love to grow that posse and use them if there's a crime scene. And you know law enforcement well. Oftentimes you'll see officers who are stuck in a post to staff and maintain a crime scene.
Right.
Wouldn't it be nice if we could put posse members there to replace them and send those officers back into service? To be facilitators of safety needs, passing out information or doing educational forums for the community on things like how to protect your children or how to make your home safe from property crimes. So I find there's ways for enforcement to support, and then there's ways for facilitating safety in our community. So I think that's been exceptional. But you asked about changes. Good men and women in that organization deserve an opportunity to thrive. I have to identify them and put them in a place to accomplish those things. At the same time, I have to evaluate those who maybe, under the current culture, have done some of the things that have adversely affected our community to the tune of $150 million in losses, and say, hey, either we get this corrected or this might not be the place for you, because I need people who are convicted about fiscal responsibility, safety for this community, and creating a positive culture to restore relationships with other law enforcement agencies.
All right, so we're going to talk some more with Paul Penzone here, running for Sheriff of Maricopa County, challenging Joe Arpaio, which is not an easy task. We're going to talk some more about his career in the past and how that prepares him for that job moving forward. So we'll be back in a moment. All right, we are back with Paul Penzone, who is running for Maricopa County Sheriff, and this is not your first race.
No, not my first rodeo.
So what is it what makes you better prepared? How did that prepare you for running this time?
You know what? Having a better understanding of political dynamics, but then committing to ensure that you don't become part of that culture. And what I mean is this: it is extremely important to me to win this because I want to serve this community. And I have spoken to the sheriff, and I don't like to share our personal conversations, but every organization has to have a succession plan. And if someone believes that any current leader is the only one who can do the job for us, we're in big trouble. There are a lot of good men and women in law enforcement that could do an exceptional job in this office, and the community needs to understand we have to move forward at some point in time. For me, what I learned last time, and it's not as though it changed me, but I had to be prepared for it, is this: I refuse to play politics by the political template.
Right.
I want to lead with integrity. I want to treat my opponent with respect. I will speak on issues. If they are failures or shortcomings, we need to address them, but it shouldn't be a character attack. And I know, unfortunately, that I will be attacked in ways that are dishonest, that are misleading and misrepresented. I'm not going to allow that to change who I am or to respond to it. I'm going to ask that the voters evaluate for themselves. But to have someone, like for me, when I became an officer as a young man, I met an officer who I looked at and I said, I was just impressed by the manner he conducted himself. And that's who I wanted to be, and that's who I've tried to be. Not that I'm perfect, but I have tried very hard to represent that shield and that role with dignity and respect. We owe it to our children to have leaders, not only in law enforcement, but primarily law enforcement, because that's my lane, that show young men and women, we're here to keep you safe, we're here to treat you with respect, and if someone bad challenges you or us in some capacity, we will work within the letter of the law, but we will not allow our emotions or subjective thoughts to affect the way we behave. How often do we see officers doing bad things on camera? And it represents the entire population, which is unfair. It misrepresents the entire. There are a lot of good men and women doing the job right. We need leaders who go out, and we have a lot of good ones, but that when they speak with integrity. They speak as selfless servants, servant leaders, but with strength and character. The sheriff, my opponent, has been, labeled as the toughest sheriff in America, and I get that whole brand. But I would want to be the strongest sheriff in America from this capacity, strong on enforcing the law, strong on abiding by and respecting the Constitution, strong on fiscal responsibility. And that when you know the sheriff's office, it's not because you know Paul Penzone, but because you know that the men and women who do the job are so effective and efficient about what they do that you come to our community and you know you're going to be safe.
So you've been in law enforcement, and it was a different generation then, and now there is really a growing anti-police or fear of the police sentiment in some communities, and a lot of those communities would be one that the Sheriff's Department patrols in. What do deputies on the street need to do differently now in 2016 than they did maybe when you left in 2000 or in 2009? How is it different, and how does it change for them because of the perception of the anti-police sentiment that's out there?
Well, I think that the innovation and the aggression of the ability to display things through social network and through the media 24/7 has changed given the public an opportunity to see things through a different lens. Not always fair, but through a different lens, because you can see things real time of an officer doing something poorly, where 20 years ago you may not have been exposed to it. Officers shouldn't be behaving any differently. They should be doing their job professionally, but what they need to recognize, in deputies, that everything you do now is front page blotter. It's not, could it possibly hit it? It will hit the front page. So if you're not willing to live up to what's going to be on the front page, then don't behave in that fashion. But here's where the challenge lies. We want resources on the front lines. We want people out there when you have a need that patrol officers can respond. Where law enforcement lacks is on the audit side. How do we have quality control to make sure you're doing your job well? Because if we assign resources there, we deplete them on the front lines. So we have to figure out a better, more effective way to be accountable to ourselves so that the community has trust and confidence again. We lost an officer a few weeks ago, Phoenix PD, and we saw the community's response and love for that. We should always recognize and appreciate the sacrifices that officers make every day, whether they are killed in the line of duty or serve and go home safely. But we have to regain that trust and earn it again.
Is there some accountability or some responsibility from the community standpoint where sometimes it's an unfair view of police officers, because you see when the evidence comes out, a lot of times the officers didn't do anything wrong,
yeah.
But the perception will always be that they have.
Yeah, and the attitude is as if there's some conspiracy behind it. If you're not happy, case in point, if you're not happy with what you see, be a part of the solution. Be willing to step up and make a difference. And there are people who are very convicted and committed to supporting the sheriff, and they see me as a threat, and that disappoints me. It shouldn't be that way. You should just look at it and say, this is another person who wants to serve this community in some capacity. I'll evaluate that person on their abilities and make a decision. But just because I oppose the person you support does not make me the enemy, and vice versa. So we need to see that if you want to make a difference, be a part of the solution. If you're not happy with what you see in law enforcement, then find a way to be positively engaged. And if you're a young man or woman growing up in this community and you're looking at it and you say, gosh, I'm fearful of cops, I don't like the way they treat me, consider it as a career and be a difference maker. Say, I'm going to be the one who goes out and shows how it should be done, and I'm going to surround myself with other like-minded people. That was the basis for my pursuit of this office.
If people want to learn more about your campaign, how do they find more if they want to find more about your campaign for sheriff?
Penzone 2016 is our website, and my Facebook is the same, Penzone for Sheriff or Penzone 2016. And listen, reach out to me directly. I love having conversations, and I tell people, I was not politically involved. I was an independent. I want to meet with independents and Republicans and others and just have the opportunity to speak about who I am. And if you walk out of that room and you say, he's not my guy, that's okay. At least you gave me a chance. But to have the blinders on and say, I just don't like him because he opposes the one I've always supported, then I think that we're selling our process in this nation short.
Well, we hope you'll come back before the campaign's over.
Absolutely,
It's great
Mike.
to have you on. Paul
Thank you.
Penzone, we'll be back. Favorite part of the show, something Arizona, something that's going to make us smile. Honoring a legend this week on Broomhead's Best. Muhammad Ali passed away, and depending on what generation you're from, a controversial character, born Cassius Clay, we know the story, refused to go to Vietnam. He was a conscientious objector. There was a time in his life where he said some things that were offensive to some people. I was born in 1967. What I remember of Muhammad Ali was the great fights that he put on, and what a showman and what an entertainer he was. But also later in life, when he lived right here in Arizona, and what he did for the rest of the world, and what an ambassador he was for the sport of boxing and for athletes in general. Raised so much money with Celebrity Fight Night and had done so many benevolent things. There was a great interview on the old Arsenio Hall show, of all the things. They had Sugar Ray Leonard, we had Muhammad Ali and Mike Tyson on the stage together. And Muhammad Ali was just so great in that. And it was just terrific to watch him interact with Mike Tyson, who in my mind, I love Mike Tyson. If there's one person I could meet, it would be Mike Tyson. So this week's Broomhead's Best, and it should be Muhammad Ali. And now it's time for something we call #this.
Let the bodies hit the floor. Let the bodies hit the floor. Let the bodies hit the floor. Let the bodies hit the floor.
Now that is John Hetlinger. He's been doing that at parties, and he's available for parties, but he performed on America's Got Talent. It's #rockin' chair to rockin' out. He is 82 years old, I believe. The song is by the band Drowning Pool. It's called Bodies. It's a very popular heavy metal song. I love heavy metal music at the gym. And he's been doing this for years and just completely killed it on America's Got Talent. So that's this week's #this. We'll be back in just a moment. Don't forget to find us on all the social media platforms. Find us on Facebook, Instagram, and of course on Twitter. Don't go away. One of the stories this week on the radio show that just drove me absolutely crazy had to do with a program that started out good. Again, government program, starting out with a good cause. It's the Obama Phone program. That's what it's known as. Here's the issue. People in rural areas, poor communities too, that didn't have access to 911. So the idea was give them telephones that they could access the outside world. Then it was expanded to internet so people could apply for jobs because so much of that's online now too. Great program, right? One per household. Except there's so much fraud right now, they're saying to the tune of $500 million a year in fraud just in that one program. Good idea, poor execution. Sounds a lot like the federal government, doesn't it? That's why I'm a small government advocate. That's what I wanted to let you know about. We'll be back next week. Have a great week, everyone. God bless.
Get more of Mike Broomhead on Facebook, Twitter, and of course weekday mornings from 6 to 10 on News Talk 550 KFYI.